Hi and welcome. I'm Naomi, if you've not been here before. I'm going to be taking you through your yoga class today. Today we've got a healthy hips sequence. It's only a short sequence today. We'll be diving straight into the movement, but of course having a relaxation at the end. We're going to be looking at moving our hip joint in all aspects of its movement. So often in yoga we have hip opening classes, and that is a lot of the focus because most yoga poses are looking at opening the hips, or the majority of poses look at opening the hips. So the external rotation of the hip, where the hip comes outwards, where we open it out. But actually the hip has many other functions. It internally rotates, it adducts and abducts, and as well it has flexion and extension where it moves forwards and backwards like in a normal traditional walk. So we have loads of different orientations that we can move that hip. It's a ball and socket joint, so it rotates, the top of the leg rotates within the pelvis, which gives it one of the most widely variable movements of any of the joints. So there really are so many ways that we can move that hip. So today we're just touching on a few other directions that we can move that hip to really make sure that we are fully functioning in our hip joint and keeping our hips as healthy as possible. We're going to start laying on our backs. So when you're ready, coming down to laying on your back. And we're going to dive straight into the exercises this morning, straight into the yoga. So we're going to take a hold, take your two hands, take a hold around the top of that thigh, or the bottom of the thigh, I guess, technically, just below the knee. And we're going to allow that leg to relax. And then just draw some little circles with the knee. So the leg is completely dead, almost like a dead leg. There's no activation in that leg. And we're just drawing some circles around. Moving the thigh bone within the hip joint. So we're moving the ball within the socket. Really good. And then switch sides. Draw the left knee in, take a clasp just below the knee. Make that leg nice and soft, nice and dead, and then just gently move into the knee. We're not moving that much into the hip joint, just warming up. Just beginning to find some mobility in the hip joint. We're mobilizing the joint. And when you're ready, extend both legs away from you. Take the feet to hip width apart, allow the feet to fall out to the side, and now we settle in. Take the palms up to the sky, and exhale, just let yourself soften onto the mat. Just let yourself release. And release any expectation of the class today. We might be working through directions of the hips that just don't necessarily come naturally to you because we've overworked the opening in our yoga poses. So it may not be as easy as you think. It won't probably be as restful as a traditional hip opening class. But just go with it. See what happens. When you're ready, draw both knees into the chest. We're going to hug the knees towards us. So here the hip joint is in flexion. We've got the thigh towards the chest. This is our hip flexion here. We're going to extend the left leg. Take the right hand and the left hand just below the knee on the shin of that right leg and draw the knee in. So here we're in a passive stretch. We're aiding that hip flexion with gravity and also the force of our body. Breathing into your body, exhaling, softening. Releasing into the hips and the glutes and the lower back. Breathing for 2 more cycles of breath. And keep the eyes closed if you wish. And when you're ready, we're going to come into an active flexion stretch. So release the hands from the knee, but keep the knee as tight into the chest as you can. We're going to take the arms alongside the body, palms pressing down. Keep the shoulders grounded. And try to draw that knee as far into the chest as when you had the hands on the thigh. It's not going to come all the way in, I can tell you that now. Unless you have super equal flexibility and mobility, it probably won't come all the way in. But just draw it in. Use those abdominal muscles. Use the hip flexors, the muscles on the front of the hip, and draw that knee in. Really good. And then bend the left knee. We're going to take outside of right foot to left thigh. So this is external rotation here. This is the one that you'll be familiar with if you've done a lot of yoga before. You can stay here if you want, or you can lift up through the left leg, take a hold behind the left thigh, and come into a slightly deeper variation here. So depending on which parts of your body are tight, you might feel this more in the glutes than you feel in the hip. But actually the glute muscles, although they're not titled hip flexors or hip muscles, they still massively help with the function of the hip. They're attached down the back of the hip, so they help with extension, but they relax in flexion as we draw the knee to the chest. They're working here. They're also lengthening here. There's so many things that the glute muscles do with the hip movement. So we're releasing the glutes here, letting them go loose, letting them feel that stretch. When you're ready, place the left knee down to the mat and then cross the thighs over like our eagle pose. We're going to keep those shins resting along one another. So here we're on internal rotation now, and this one often is the hardest one for most people. It just doesn't feel natural, so only go as far as your body wants. We're holding behind the left thigh, drawing the knees into the chest. I'm feeling pretty tight today, so I've not got those knees drawn in all that far. Just gently moving with your body. And then uncross the legs. Extend the right leg along the mat. Draw the left knee in. Come into that hip flexion on the other side. Release the shoulders, release the collarbones, and relax. And just let it go. Let yourself release. Let yourself relax and breathe for 2 full cycles of breath. And then we're going to come into our active stretch. So take the arms onto the mat, palms pressed down, draw that knee in as hard as you can. Draw, draw, draw. It's really, really activating through the core, through the hip flexors. You're massively drawing that in. And you might have noticed that my left side is very different to my right side. I don't have half as much strength on this left side. So maybe that's something I would want to work on. And maybe you notice a difference between your left and right as well. That is completely normal. Do not worry. Really good. Bend your right knee. Draw the outside of the left foot, the ankle, onto the right thigh. If you want to take it deeper, pick up behind the right thigh and draw that thigh in. Remember, always keep that left foot flexed to support the knee joint on the left. Breathe into your hips. Breathe into the movement. You don't want to be working with pinching or pain in your knee or in your hip. Often tightness within the hip can relate into the knee in hip opening poses like this. And that's when we tend to find knee injuries in yoga, is when people have tight hips. We force ourselves into these deep hip opening poses, and then we find that we have knee injuries. So it's so important just to go as far as the body can, but not beyond. So just look after your body. When you're ready, slide that thigh on top. Connect the shins. So you don't have to wrap the legs, but we're just connecting the shins to keep that internal rotation. And then take a hold behind the right leg and draw the legs in. And you may actually feel that there's not much going on. You can't really feel that much. Maybe you feel a light stretch down the outer thighs. We're just warming up, so don't worry. Just notice how the hips feel. Breathing for 2. Breathing for 1. Uncross the legs and rock up to seated. We're going to take our feet mat width apart. So take those feet mat width apart. We're going to take the hands behind us, soles of the feet to the mat. The hands can be whichever way is comfortable. We want the chest upright. As you exhale, roll the knees over to the right. So we've got internal rotation on the left leg, external rotation on the right. Inhale back to center. Exhale over to the other side. One more time each side, just finding mobility in the hips through this little flow. Exhale to the left. And then inhale to center. We're going to cross the ankles, pop ourselves up, and step back all the way to downward facing dog. And it might be your first downward facing dog of the day, so just paddle out those feet, walk out the backs of the legs, walk the heels out, let it lengthen. Keep the fingertips and the thumbs connected to the earth to keep you strong through the shoulders. Really nice. Take the feet together at the back of the mat. Inhale, lift the left leg to the sky. Bring the left leg to the left elbow. And then push it back. This time bring it across the torso to the right elbow. Squeeze it in. And extend back. Place the leg down. So we're strengthening the hip now. Lift other leg. Draw it in. Knee to right elbow. Squeeze it in. And push back. Come forward. Exhale. Knee to elbow. And push back. Lovely. Lengthen that leg. Place the foot to the mat. Inhale. Lift the right leg to the sky. Step the right foot to between the hands. And then just step the back foot in a little bit shorter than you would for your normal lunge. We're going to bend the back knee. And you can see as I bend my back knee, my pelvis tilts. And I'm coming more upright with the spine. And then I'm going to lift my hands. So here, I'm in a functional lunge. I'm not taking a super deep stretch through that left hip flexor. I'm actually strengthening more through the hips than I am stretching. We're going to breathe here for 3. For 2. For 1. Beautiful. Take the hands to the mat. Hop that back foot back an inch. Drop the left knee down. Untuck the left toes. And then bring the hands to the right thigh. And feel the difference between these two lunges. Now we have a really deep hip opening pose where the front of that left hip is getting a deep stretch. Whereas before we had a deep activation and a strengthening, but we were in the same pose. So just by cueing and setting up slightly differently, you can completely change the function of the pose. Take the hands to the mat, firm the hands either side of front foot, step back to downward facing dog. From here, lift left leg, step all the way through. Hop that back foot in an inch or 2. Windmill the hands, we're finding our active lunge on the other side. So bend that back knee. Front knee stays over front ankle. Hands up to the sky. And you'll feel that. You're getting a stretch through the right hip flexor, but you're getting so much strength into the hips that it's just a completely different sensation to how we normally have our lunge. Squeezing in for 2. For 1. Lovely. Release the hands to the mat. Step that back foot back an inch. Untuck the back toe. Drop the right knee to the mat and just settle in. Then bring the hands to the thigh. Stretch it out. And release. Really good. When you're ready, bring the hands to the mat. Tuck the back toes and walk it back into a child's pose. Send the hips to the heels. Allow the glutes to release. Take a little stretch here. Then tiptoe the hands all the way to the body. And we're going to come onto our backs now. So just draw ourselves back in. Back to lying on our backs. Take the feet mat width apart. Roll the knees so that they come in towards one another. And then take the arms alongside the body. And here we come into a passive psoas release. So the psoas muscles are the muscles that come along the front of the hips. And they're quite big muscles. They attach into the spine, right the way into the hips. And they get tight as we sit a lot. So here now, in our relaxation, let's let them go. Breathe into your body and soften. Just take a few cycles of breath. And as you exhale, breathe into your hips. Feel the hips soften as you exhale. As you breathe out, the hips just completely relax. Let it go. And in your own time, when you feel ready, just draw the knees into the chest. Rock yourself up to seated. And bring the hands together at the heart center, keeping the eyes closed if you can. Drop the chin to the chest, blink open the eyes, allow the light back in. And slowly lift the gaze. Namaste. Thank you so much for practicing with me. I hope you found that gave you a little bit of an insight into the different ways that we can move our hip joint. I've just linked a blog post that I've written about the different movements of the hips, so if you were interested you can go and read some more about that and study up on your hip anatomy if you wish. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon.